The dust rose like a golden mist as August Vaughn rode hard toward the distant silhouette of his homestead, the setting sun casting long shadows across the Montana plains. The year was 1878, and August had spent 3 days tracking a herd of mustangs, his mind consumed by the practical need for strong horses rather than the emptiness that awaited him at home. He knew his young sons would be waiting, but the thought brought as much pain as comfort since Aliner's passing 2 winters ago. The burden of raising 5-year-old twins alone had nearly broken him, until Daisy Norton had arrived 6 months ago, answering his desperate advertisement for a housekeeper. August slowed his horse as the modest ranch house came into view. Smoke curled from the chimney despite the warm spring evening, and he could see movement through the window's shadows dancing in the lamplight. His sons, Thomas and Timothy, would be sitting at the table by now, their small faces turned toward the door in anticipation. And Daisy would be there too, her honey-colored hair pulled back, her green eyes watchful as she managed his household with quiet efficiency. As August dismounted, he heard laughter from inside his son's high-pitched giggles followed by Daisy's melodic response. The sound made something twist painfully in his chest. They sounded like a family, but they weren't. Daisy was an employee, nothing more. He couldn't afford to think otherwise. "Pa's home," Timothy shouted as August pushed through the door, stomping dust from his boots. Both boys scrambled from their chairs, rushing toward him with outstretched arms. "Careful now," August said, his voice gruff as he knelt to embrace them. Their small bodies collided with his, smelling of soap and the wild herbs Daisy used in their baths. "Have you been good for Miss Norton?" "Yes, sir," Thomas answered, his blue eyes so like Aliner's wide and earnest. "We helped with the chickens and Miss Daisy showed us how to make biscuits." August looked up to find Daisy watching them from the kitchen doorway, a dishcloth in her hands. She wore a simple blue dress, modest and practical, yet somehow it highlighted the gentle curves of her figure in a way that made August's mouth go dry. "Welcome home, Mr. Vaughn," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Dinner's nearly ready." August nodded, unable to form words for a moment. At 24, Daisy was too young, he often thought, to be buried out here on a remote ranch with only a widower and his sons for company. She deserved better. She deserved a proper life with a husband who could give her children of her own, not caring for another woman's offspring. "Thank you, Miss Norton," he finally managed, standing and settling his sons back at the table. "Any trouble while I was away?" "Nothing worth mentioning," Daisy replied, turning back to the stove. "Mr. Hollister from the general store delivered our supplies yesterday. I paid him from the household account, as you instructed." August watched as she moved efficiently around the kitchen, serving up a hearty stew with fresh biscuits. Her competence was both a blessing and a torment. With each passing day, he found himself relying on her more not just for cooking and cleaning, but for the warmth she brought to his home, the gentle way she handled his sons, the quiet conversations they sometimes shared after the boys were asleep. That night, after the twins were tucked into bed, August sat at the kitchen table going over his accounts while Daisy mended a pair of Thomas's trousers by the fire. The silence between them was comfortable, broken only by the occasional crack of the burning logs and the soft scratch of August's pencil. "Did you find suitable horses?" Daisy asked eventually, not looking up from her stitching. "A few promising ones," August replied, grateful for the safe topic. "Wild as the devil but strong. Good breeding stock if I can break them properly." "The boys missed you," she said, her needle moving rhythmically through the fabric. "They asked about you every night." August's pencil paused. "They have to learn that work comes first. It's how we survive out here." Daisy looked up then, her green eyes reflecting the firelight. "They're still very young, Mr. Vaughn. They don't understand necessity the way adults do. They only know their father was gone and they were afraid." "Afraid?" August frowned, setting down his pencil. "What have they to be afraid of? I've always returned." "That you wouldn't," Daisy said simply. That's what Timothy told me when he cried the second night. What if Pa doesn't come back like Mama? The words struck August like a physical blow. He pushed back from the table, striding to the window to stare out at the darkness. I can't coddle them. Life out here is harsh. They need to learn that early. Teaching resilience needn't mean denying comfort, Daisy said quietly. They're strong boys, just like their father. But they need to know it's safe to love, too. August turned to face her, his expression guarded. And what would you know about it, Miss Norton? You're hardly more than a girl yourself. A flush of color rose in Daisy's cheeks, but her gaze remained steady. I was 16 when my parents died in that influenza outbreak. I raised my 3 younger siblings until they were old enough to fend for themselves. I know something of loss and responsibility, Mr. Vaughn. August had the grace to look ashamed. He knew her story. It was one of the reasons he'd hired her. An unmarried woman with experience caring for children was exactly what he'd needed. I apologize, he said stiffly. That was uncalled for. Accepted, Daisy replied, returning to her mending. After a moment, she added, I don't presume to tell you how to raise your sons, Mr. Vaughn. I merely thought you should know what's in their hearts. August nodded, returning to his ledger without another word. But sleep eluded him that night, his mind filled with thoughts of his son's fears and the quiet strength of the woman sleeping down the hall. Spring blossomed into summer, and with it came the back-breaking work of maintaining the ranch. August spent long days training the wild horses he'd captured, building new fencing for the expanded corral, and negotiating with buyers from as far away as Denver. Through it all, Daisy maintained the household with unwavering dedication, not only keeping the boys fed and clothed but also teaching them their letters and numbers, telling them stories of the wider world, and ensuring they still had time to simply be children. On a particularly scorching July afternoon, August returned from the east pasture to find Daisy and the boys splashing in the creek that ran behind the house. The twins wore only their undergarments, their pale skin already turning bronze from the summer sun. Daisy had hiked her skirt to her knees, revealing slender calves as she waded in the shallow water, her laughter mingling with the boys as they tried to catch minnows with their bare hands. August reined his horse to a stop, transfixed by the scene. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine that this was truly his family, that Daisy was his wife, the mother of his children, and that the emptiness inside him was just a bad dream from which he'd awakened. Timothy spotted him first, waving wildly. Pa, come see, I caught a frog. August dismounted slowly, tethering his horse to a nearby tree. As he approached the creek bank, Daisy straightened, quickly pushing down her skirt. Her hair had come loose from its usual tidy arrangement, tumbling around her shoulders in damp waves. Water droplets clung to her skin, catching the sunlight. I'm sorry, Mr. Vaughn, she said, flustered. The heat was so oppressive and the boys were restless. I thought a little time in the creek wouldn't hurt. No need to apologize, August said, his voice rougher than intended. It's good for them to cool off. Thomas waded toward him, holding out cupped hands. Look what Miss Daisy showed us how to do, Pa. August knelt to examine his son's prize, a tiny, perfect water lily blossom floating in the collected water of his palms. She says flowers can grow right in the water, Thomas explained solemnly. Isn't that something special? It certainly is, August agreed, glancing up at Daisy, who was watching them with a soft expression that made his heart beat faster. That evening, after the boys were asleep, Daisy approached August as he sat on the porch, smoking his evening pipe. The heat of the day had finally broken, giving way to a pleasant coolness carried on a gentle breeze. May I join you? She asked, gesturing to the empty chair beside him. August nodded, suddenly aware of his shirt sleeves rolled up to the elbows and the day's stubble darkening his jaw. Daisy settled beside him, her hands folded neatly in her lap. I've been meaning to speak with you about something, she began, her voice hesitant in a way it rarely was. I received a letter last week from my sister in Denver. She's expecting her first child come winter, and she's asked if I might consider moving there to help her. August's pipe nearly slipped from his fingers. "You're leaving?" The words emerged more sharply than he intended. "I haven't decided," Daisy said quickly. "It's a considerable decision. I care deeply for Thomas and Timothy. They've become very important to me." August stared out at the darkening landscape, struggling to master the surge of panic her words had triggered. "When would you go?" "If you decided to accept." "Not until September at the earliest. I wouldn't leave you without proper time to find a replacement." "A replacement." August repeated the word as if it were a foreign language he couldn't quite translate. How did one replace Daisy Norton? It wasn't just her capabilities as a housekeeper. It was the way she sang while kneading bread, how she knew exactly when Timothy was about to have one of his nightmares, the sound of her reading to the boys before bed the 100 small ways she'd made his house a home again. "Of course, it would be entirely professional," Daisy continued, misinterpreting his silence. "I would help train whoever you hire, ensure they understand the boys' routines, your preferences. Is it the money?" August interrupted, turning to face her. "Because if that's the issue, I can pay you more. Times have been better since we sold those horses to the army." Daisy's eyes widened slightly. "No, Mr. Vaughn, your compensation has always been fair. It's just that, well, family is important. And Denver offers opportunities that Silver Creek doesn't." "What opportunities?" August demanded, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. "Fancy dresses, theater shows, gentlemen callers." Daisy stood abruptly, her expression closing off. "Perhaps this conversation would be better continued when you're in a more reasonable frame of mind. Good night, Mr. Vaughn." August watched her retreating figure, cursing himself for his clumsiness. He couldn't very well forbid her to go, nor could he articulate why the thought of her leaving filled him with such dread. She was his employee, not his wife. He had no claim on her beyond the monthly wages he paid. And yet, as he sat alone in the gathering darkness, August was forced to confront a truth he'd been avoiding for months. Daisy Norton had become essential to him in ways that had nothing to do with her duties as a housekeeper. The weeks that followed were strained. August threw himself into his work, spending longer hours with the horses and taking unnecessary trips to town. Daisy maintained her usual efficiency, but the easy companionship they'd shared was replaced by careful politeness. Only with the twins did she remain unchanged, warm, affectionate, endlessly patient. August watched her with his sons, torn between gratitude and resentment. How could she consider leaving them? Didn't she realize how much they needed her, how much he knew? He wouldn't allow himself to complete that thought. He'd already buried one woman he loved. He wouldn't risk his heart again, especially not with someone young enough to want children of her own, someone clearly eager to return to civilization after her rural exile. August's resolve was tested one afternoon in mid-August when he returned unexpectedly from town to find Daisy sitting at the kitchen table, tears streaming down her face as she read a letter. She hastily wiped her cheeks when she heard his boots on the porch, but not quickly enough to hide the evidence of her distress. "What's happened?" August asked, alarm replacing his usual reserve. "Are the boys?" "They're fine," Daisy assured him quickly. "They're napping. It's nothing of concern, Mr. Vaughn." August crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling out the chair across from her. "You're crying. That's of concern to me." Daisy looked down at the letter, then back up at him, her green eyes swimming with tears. "My sister's husband has been offered a position in San Francisco. They're moving west before winter. She won't need my help after all." Relief and confusion warred within August. "But isn't that good news? You can stay," he broke off, realizing how presumptuous he sounded. "That is, you don't have to make a difficult choice now." "Yes," Daisy agreed, but fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "It's just, I haven't seen my sister in nearly 2 years. I'd been looking forward to being with family again, to meeting my niece or nephew." Without thinking, August reached across the table and took her hand. Her skin was soft against his calloused palm. "I'm sorry, I know how important family is." Daisy looked at their joined hands, then at August's face, Something shifted in her expression, a vulnerability he'd never seen before. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever have a family of my own again. Not just siblings, but a husband, children. August's throat tightened. He should say something reassuring. He should tell her that, of course, she would a woman as beautiful and kind as Daisy would have her pick of suitors in any decent-sized town. Instead, he found himself asking, "Is that why you considered leaving? To find a husband?" Daisy withdrew her hand, a flush spreading across her cheeks. "That's hardly an appropriate question, Mr. Vaughn." "No, I suppose it isn't," August agreed, standing abruptly. "Forgive me, I should check on the horses." He fled the house like a coward, unable to face the implications of his own question or what her answer might have been. That night, lying awake in his bed, August finally admitted the truth to himself. He was falling in love with Daisy Norton. The realization brought no joy, only fear. He'd sworn after Alina died that he would never put himself in such a vulnerable position again. Loving someone meant risking loss, and he'd barely survived it the first time. But even as he reaffirmed his determination to maintain a proper distance, August knew it was already too late. Daisy had somehow slipped past his defenses, becoming as essential to him as air. The only solution was to ensure she never knew, to protect them both from the inevitable pain that would follow. September arrived with cooler temperatures and the golden light that signaled autumn's approach. August spent more time away from the ranch, taking the boys with him when possible, telling himself he was preparing all of them for an eventual separation that now seemed inevitable. Daisy would leave, sooner or later. Better to start weaning themselves from dependence on her now. The crisis came on an ordinary Tuesday. August had taken the twins to help him check fence lines, returning mid-afternoon to find Daisy packing a small trunk in her room, her face set in lines of quiet determination. "What are you doing?" he demanded from the doorway, ignoring the way his heart seemed to stop in his chest. Daisy straightened, turning to face him with a dignity that only heightened his panic. "I've received an offer of employment from the new schoolteacher in Silver Creek. She needs assistance with the younger children, and the position includes room and board at the schoolhouse." "You're leaving?" August's voice was barely recognizable, even to himself. "Just like that." "I've given it considerable thought," Daisy replied, her composure slipping just slightly. "I believe it's for the best." "Best for whom?" August took a step into the room, then stopped, aware he was intruding on her private space. "The boys need you." "The boys will adapt," Daisy said, though her voice wavered. "Children are resilient, as you yourself have pointed out. And Silver Creek is only an hour's ride. I could visit on Sundays, perhaps. And what about what I need?" The words escaped before August could stop them, hanging in the air between them like gunsmoke. Daisy went very still, her green eyes searching his face. "What do you need, August?" It was the first time she'd used his given name, and the sound of it on her lips broke something loose inside him. I need you not to leave." "Why?" Daisy asked simply, taking a step toward him. August swallowed hard, his hands clenching at his sides. "Because the boys—" "No," Daisy interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. "Not the boys. Why do you need me to stay, August?" He really looked at her, and saw the hope and fear mingled in her expression. In that moment, August understood that his attempts at distance hadn't protected either of them. They'd only caused pain. "Because I'm in love with you," he admitted, the words rough with emotion. "God help me, I've tried not to be. I've told myself 1,000 times that you deserve better than a broken-down widower with 2 small boys and a ranch that's barely profitable. That you're too young, too full of life to be buried out here with us. But the thought of you leaving feels like having my heart torn out all over again." Tears filled Daisy's eyes, but she was smiling a radiant, joyful smile that transformed her face. "Then ask me to stay, August, not as your housekeeper. Ask me properly." August closed the distance between them in 2 long strides, taking her hands in his. "Stay with us, Daisy, be my wife. Be a mother to my sons, they already love you almost as much as I do." "Are you certain?" Daisy asked, her voice trembling. "I know how much you loved Eleanor. I would never want to replace her in your heart." "Eleanor will always be a part of me," August said honestly. "She gave me my sons, and for that I'll always be grateful. But my heart has room for a new love, a different love, what I feel for you, Daisy. It doesn't diminish what I had with her, it's just different. Equally true, equally deep." Daisy raised a hand to his cheek, her touch feather light. "I love you, August Vaughn. I've loved you for months. I love your sons as if they were my own. And yes, I will stay. I will be your wife." August pulled her into his arms, lowering his mouth to hers in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened with all the pent-up longing of months. Daisy's arms wound around his neck, her body fitting against his as if made for him. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, August rested his forehead against hers. "I should speak to the boys," he murmured. "Make sure they understand what this means." "They're smarter than you give them credit for," Daisy said with a soft laugh. "Thomas asked me last week if I was going to be their new mama. I didn't know what to tell him." "Tell them yes," August said firmly, "if you're willing." The conversation with the twins went better than August had dared hope. Far from being confused or upset, both boys were ecstatic at the news that Miss Daisy would become their mother. Timothy immediately asked if they would have to call her Ma now, while Thomas wanted to know if they could have a baby brother once Daisy was officially part of the family. "One step at a time," August told them, glancing at Daisy's blushing face. "First, we need to have a proper wedding." They were married 2 weeks later in Silver Creek's small church, with the twins serving as ring bearers and half the town in attendance. Daisy wore a simple cream-colored dress with lace at the collar and cuffs, and August thought she had never looked more beautiful than when she spoke her vows in a clear, steady voice that carried to the rafters. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with neighbors bringing food and music and good wishes. As twilight fell, August found himself standing on the porch, watching his wife, dancing with their sons, her laughter mingling with theirs in the golden evening light. Daniel Fletcher, an old friend who ran the livery stable in town, joined August on the porch, handing him a glass of whiskey. "Never thought I'd see the day," he commented, nodding toward Daisy. "You were so dead set against remarrying after Eleanor passed. What changed your mind?" August took a sip of whiskey, considering the question. "I tried to tell myself I didn't need her," he said finally. "That the boys and I were managing just fine on our own. But then she threatened to leave, and the boys cried for 3 nights straight at the thought of losing her. Made me realize I'd been fooling myself." "The boys cried, huh?" Daniel said with a knowing smile. "And what about you?" August returned the smile ruefully. "Let's just say I came to my senses before it was too late." Later that night, with their guests departed and the twins finally asleep after the excitement of the day, August and Daisy stood in the bedroom that was now theirs to share. August reached for his new wife with reverent hands, drawing her close in the soft lamplight. "Are you happy, Mrs. Vaughn?" he asked quietly, still marveling at the reality of her in his arms. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Daisy assured him, rising on her toes to brush her lips against his. "This is where I belong, August, with you and the boys. This is my family." August kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and gratitude into the embrace. He'd been given a second chance at happiness, something he'd never thought possible after losing Eleanor. But Daisy had shown him that his heart was capable of healing, of loving again, even more fiercely than before. As he held his wife in the quiet of their bedroom, August silently thanked whatever twist of fate had brought Daisy Norton into their lives. The stubborn cowboy who'd insisted he didn't need anyone was gone, replaced by a man who understood that love wasn't a weakness but the greatest strength of all. 1 year later, August stood on the same porch, cradling his newborn daughter in his arms while Daisy supervised the twins' attempts to hang birthday decorations in the front yard. Eleanor Rose Vaughn, named for the mother she would never know and the flowers her parents both loved, slept peacefully against her father's chest, unaware of the celebration planned for her older brother's 7th birthday. "Careful on that ladder, Thomas," Daisy called, one hand supporting her still recovering body as she directed the placement of paper chains and ribbons. August watched his wife with a surge of love so powerful it nearly took his breath away. The past year had brought changes he couldn't have imagined. Daisy's pregnancy, announced on Christmas morning to the boys' enthusiastic delight, the expansion of the ranch house to accommodate their growing family, the increasing prosperity of their horse breeding business, now becoming known throughout the territory. But more than the material changes were the transformations within himself. The bitterness and fear that had gripped him after Aliner's death had melted away, replaced by a deep gratitude for each day with his family. He'd learned to balance work with the equally important task of being present for his children and for Daisy, whose love had saved him from a half-life of emotional isolation. "What are you thinking about, looking so serious?" Daisy asked, climbing the porch steps to join him. "About how close I came to losing all this," August replied honestly. "If you hadn't been brave enough to challenge me, to make me face what I was really afraid of, you'd have figured it out eventually," Daisy said, slipping an arm around his waist and leaning her head against his shoulder. "You're stubborn, August Vaughn, but you're not stupid." August laughed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I'm glad you had more faith in me than I deserved." "I saw the man behind the walls," Daisy said simply. "The man who loved his sons so fiercely he was terrified of anything that might hurt them again, including love. Pa, Ma, look what we did," Timothy called excitedly, pointing to the somewhat lopsided but colorful decorations now adorning the yard. "It's perfect," Daisy called back, her face glowing with pride. "Your friends will be so impressed when they arrive." As the twins ran off to prepare for their guests, August shifted the sleeping baby to one arm so he could pull Daisy closer with the other. "Thank you," he murmured against her hair. "For what?" she asked, tilting her face up to his. "For not giving up on us. For teaching me that needing someone isn't weakness. For giving our children a mother's love again." "Those are the easiest things I've ever done," Daisy assured him, rising on her toes to kiss him softly. "Loving you and our children is as natural as breathing." Aliner rose, stirred between them, her tiny mouth opening in a yawn before she settled back to sleep. August looked down at his daughter, then at the boys racing around the yard, and finally at his wife, her green eyes reflecting all the love he felt in his own heart. The cowboy who'd once claimed he didn't need anyone had become a man who understood that love was the greatest need of all and the greatest gift. In Daisy's arms, in their children's laughter, August Vaughn had found a home more secure than any four walls could provide. A home built on the foundation of a love strong enough to overcome fear, stubborn enough to wait for recognition, and deep enough to last a lifetime.